So I went on a little bit of a numbers mission this morning. Got up, went for the old run, got the creative juices flowing a little bit. What are we going to write about? What are we going to talk about today? Because you realize we've got one show today, one show tomorrow, and then we got Brian Kelly press conference on Monday. We've got Clemson to look right dead between the eyes 2 shows from now. But you still got to kind of massage some things and figure out what you want to talk about as this week concludes. And I wanted to spend some time on special teams. I did a segment on special teams a couple weeks ago and talked about how I think LSU is going to have a quality special teams unit. But I wanted to do some digging in 2 different respects about special teams for a story I've got up at LouisianaSports.net and for what I want to talk about today. And I go back to a team that now is significantly in the rearview mirror. I do realize that. But I feel like the recall on it for my listenership, for the LSU fan base, is pretty good. I think most of y'all, if you're not 17 years old, have a pretty good remembrance of that 2011 LSU team. It's one of those deals where when they go on a run that special, and with YouTube around right now, like you feel probably a little bit more connected, remember and have better recall of that season than if I said, what about the 2014 Tigers? You have to go through, okay, that was when Mettenberger left, Beckham and Landry left. Oh, that was Fournette's first year. Yeah, he went to Houston. You could probably get there if I say 2014, but it takes you a little bit longer. When I say 2011, I feel like a lot of you kind of lock in to that team. And I wanted to talk about the special teams on that unit just as an example of how impactful it can be. I think you'll remember these plays. Tyron Mathieu strips DeAnthony Thomas on that punt in Arlington and runs it back for a touchdown. Like, that is a monster play in that game. Obviously, Tyron did the same thing when LSU was down 14-0 against Arkansas in Tiger Stadium. He runs a punt back 90 yards, and LSU just whitewashes the Hogs from there. LSU did not get a first down in the first half against Georgia in the SEC championship game. But Tyron runs a punt back, and that gets LSU kickstarted. He runs another one back into the red zone, and LSU destroys Georgia in the second half of that game. So you look at those plays, and I would also point to Morris Claiborne's kickoff return in Morgantown that absolutely helped LSU win that game and maybe staved off a loss in that game. I'll tell you this is something that I think you probably don't remember off of hand. I actually, and this is one of the few sidebars I actually have vivid memories of writing because I've never been in Morgantown and have not been back since, so it's the only time I ever spent in Morgantown. Luke Johnson was working for Tiger Rag at the time. I was with BBI. Luke wrote the game story, and I wrote the sidebar, which means the story kind of off to the side, and I wrote it on LSU special teams that day. So I went back and said, well, what did they do so special? Okay, well, here's that. Morris Claiborne ran a kickoff back. You remember that, and West Virginia has drawn within 1 score when he did that. But Brad Wing, also that night in Morgantown, dropped 6 punts inside the 20-yard line. 6 in that game. West Virginia's average starting field position for that game was their own 15-yard line. So in that game, where West Virginia outgained LSU by 167 yards of total offense, LSU won the game by 26 points. Because Brad Wing pinned West Virginia on every drive, and Morris Claiborne busted a punt return. So you look at that, that's pretty significant stuff. Now I bring you to a few weeks later in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You remember a lot from that game. You remember Jordan Jefferson coming in and running the option. You remember Eric Reed's interception. You remember Michael Ford out of bounds. You remember Alabama missing 100 kicks. You remember a lot of things from that game, right? But what you may remember or may not is that Brad Wing, after the Eric Reed interception that LSU was pinned inside its own 3-yard line, kicked a 73-yard punt in that game to flip the field and make sure that Alabama couldn't score before the end of the game, so you got into overtime. That's a huge play in that game that a lot of you probably remember. It hit the Skycam wire. But special teams for that 2011 team was just massive in huge games, and you don't go 13-0 to start that season if you don't have great special teams. Now let's look at what LSU has done since in the last 4 years with Brian Kelly. Well, you remember the first game Brian Kelly ever coached at LSU. You got 2 kicks blocked, including the extra point that kept you out of overtime, and you muffed 2 punts in that game. Quite literally, if you win that game against Florida State, you go to College Station, Texas, where you got crushed, But you go into that game with legitimate national championship implications. Now, I think Georgia was going to dust you the next week anyway, but, I mean, I'm not making that up. If you beat Florida State, you would have gone to the SC championship game with just one loss. You would have gone to College Station with just one loss, and you could have beat A&M, played Georgia for the right to go play in the playoff. But you didn't because special teams were so bad. You muffed the opening kickoff against Tennessee. That year, you were 114th nationally in punt return average. 114th at LSU. That's just unacceptable. So now you bring in Ahmad Anan from Grambling, whose job is to fix the special teams. Last year, you were dead last in the SEC in average punting. Dead last, 16th. Like, that's unacceptable at LSU. You were 126th out of 134 teams in average punting. You had Peyton Todd, Blake Oxendorf. They averaged 39.6 yards per punt. You only had one punt the entire season that went 50 yards. This is LSU. Get a punter. So now you've gone out and added Grant Chadwick. As a freshman last year, he had 13 punts that went 50 yards. In one game against Duke, he averaged 48.8 yards per punt. 21 of his punts were down inside the 20. LSU's two punters last year combined for 12. He had 21. Distance control, hang time, leg strength, all that. Chadwick is a significant upgrade from what you had last year. And then you've got Aaron Burrell, who's going to handle your kickoffs for you. He was third in the country in touchback percentage last year. He's back. So as far as your guys who were kicking the ball away, kickoffs and punts, you feel really good about that. Chadwick had an all-conference year, averaged a significant amount as a freshman, pinned the ball deep, like great year. Burrell is a proven commodity. And then you got Damian Ramos, who's been your place kicker for 3 years. He's third all-time in attempts at LSU, and he's seventh all-time in accuracy. 78% of his kicks he's made. So from that perspective, kicking the football, you feel like you're in a better spot. Now, Brian Kelly said this back on Monday when we talked to him. He said, and this isn't to bash anybody, but you've watched us play. We very rarely, other than returns, which we had, we didn't flip the field with our feet. We didn't flip the field with the punt game. We need to flip the field and put pressure on offenses, and we didn't do a very good job of that last year. So as much as it's about returns, we've got to flip the field too and let our defense get the ball back for our offense in a short field. Those are the things we're really focused on. LSU's defense is going to be good this year. It's going to be a good defense. You're going to watch that team fly around, make tackles for loss, be tough on third down, get after the quarterback. They're going to make some plays on the ball in the secondary. Give them some help with the ability to pin teams back, and then you can make life easier for your offense. So I like LSU's ability in special teams all the way through. And that doesn't even include the return game, and I don't even need to talk about that. Xavion Thomas has 2 kickoff return touchdowns in his career and a punt return touchdown. Barian Brown set the SEC record with 5 kickoff return touchdowns in his time at Kentucky. He's their all-time leader in kick return yards. That doesn't even mention Aaron Anderson, who housed a kickoff against Oklahoma last year. It doesn't mention Chris Hilton, who's maybe the fastest guy out there if they wanted to. I wouldn't mind if they sent Caleb Jackson back there to return kickoffs. He's big, strong, and fast. The return game I have no worries about. And Brian Kelly actually had a quote about that on Monday. He said, you punt it to us, we want to return that son of a gun every single time. I'm very bullish on this special teams group. And I don't think I'm projecting here. Ramos is proven. I don't think the transition from Middle Tennessee State to LSU in the SEC is going to be way too much for Grant Chadwick to deal with. Now, Oxendorf came up from Tech and didn't have a great year after he was all conference at Tech, so I can't guarantee that, but it feels pretty likely. And then you got the return game that should be great, and Burrell. I think LSU on special teams is really set up. And if you're going to have a really good team, you think about the 2011 team that had those huge impact plays on special teams. Even 2019, was a team that was very good on special teams. Cade York was 12 of 12 on field goals from inside 43 yards. Zach Von Rosenberg kicked 47 points, and only 9 of them got returned. Like, good teams have good special teams. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about it, and I can promise you when we get into the game pick segment on Fridays, and it's LSU Bama, or it's LSU Clemson next week, or it's LSU Ole Miss and Oxford, like, I'm not going to spend 15 minutes breaking down the special teams matchups. But that doesn't mean that 1 or 2 plays that happen in that game on special teams won't be massively impactful. I cherry-picked some of those statistics from years gone by, and I admit that, like, that's pretty obvious. But I just wanted to illustrate the point that you've got such good athletes here. You've got such good resources here. There's no reason not to be really good at this kind of stuff. And there have been times where LSU just hasn't been good at this stuff. And I'm not going to completely blame Brian Polian because Malik Neighbors and Jack Besh don't catch punts and kickoffs. They're pros. They're in the NFL. They have great hands. Something was in the water for 5 weeks for LSU, couldn't catch the ball. But I feel great about this group right now, and I think it's very, very important that LSU plays excellent on the special teams side of things. I think they will do that. So look at special teams there. I've got that all written out for you on LouisianaSports.net if you want to go check that out. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.